My name is Paul Pehrson. As David said, I am a certified Flare trainer. I have been using MadCap Flare since version 2, and we're now on version 9. And I love the power of Flare, and I love the power of the integration between Capture and Flare. Many of you, I imagine, are already using some screen capture tool, and if you were anything like me before I understood what Capture could do, you probably think that someone's going to drag that tool, out of your cold, dead hand. But the reality is that there are a lot of things that Capture can do to make your documentation project easier, to help you be faster, to help you to deliver changes very quickly in a way that really is powerful, in a way that really improves your ability to do work. And so I'm hoping by the end of this presentation today that even some of you will be converted, if that's the right word, so that we can get you to understand the power of Capture and say, oh, yeah, I really should be using Capture with my Flare projects. So let's go ahead and get started then. So first, we're going to talk about Flare and Capture together, how they integrate. And then we're going to talk about some of the features in Capture that save you time, that save you money, that allow you to reuse content. Then I'm going to answer a couple of frequent questions I get about using Capture. And then at the very end, we'll have time for the question and answer. So if you haven't been using Capture as part of your MadCap workflow, now's the time to begin. Starting with version 9 of Flare, which was released a couple of months ago, Capture is a free download for Flare customers. So when you upgrade to version 9, you get the link to download Flare, and you get a separate link to download Capture, and you get the keys for them. So I have a couple of screen capture tools that I use kind of depending on which program I'm working in, but I always use Capture when I'm working in Flare. There have been some times when I've been working in the Flare project and I say, oh, I'll just use this other tool, which will remain nameless. And then I came back later and I wanted to make some edit or make some change, and I was sad because I had to redo a bunch of work that if I had used Capture from the beginning, it would have saved me a lot of effort. Flare makes it very easy to initiate screen captures. Depending on your settings, you don't even need to open Capture, or you don't have to open the Capture program itself. You can actually click a button in Flare to begin the capture. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Capture allows you to edit your images, and you can edit any image in Flare by right-clicking on it and selecting Edit with MadCap Capture. Capture also makes it easy to use conditions and variables from your Flare project in the callouts of your Capture images. And so we're going to show how some of these features work. So how does Capture save me time? Well, Capture saves time because you only have to do the editing work of an image once. When you crop an image in Capture and you come back later and want to recapture the same image, it remembers the crop zone. And so you could take a screenshot, a full-page screenshot, crop it down to just a button, come back later, and you can recapture the screen, and it will capture the entire screen again, and then it will crop itself down automatically to the same button size that you had initially. And you can come back and recrop it later. Once you've saved your image in Capture, you insert it into your Flare document. Maybe a year later, you come back and say, oh, I wish I hadn't cropped it quite so small. I need some more context. You go back into the Capture image, and you can recrop the same image that you had previously. So let's talk about that cropping then. Capture remembers where the screen was that you captured, what size the capture was, and how you cropped it. This is really important because if you're anything like me, you've been working with developers who a week before product launch, and this actually happened, a week before product launch, they decided that they needed to change the UI they needed to change the color of the UI, and it wasn't going to be blue anymore. Now it was going to be green. And everyone said, oh, that's not that big of a change. We just changed some style sheets and everything's fine. And I say, we have over 100 images in the documentation that are all outdated now because you changed the UI. And they said, well, how hard is that to fix? and I said, well, I guess it could be harder because I had used capture. So let me show you. When you crop an image in capture, that original image is never deleted. It's stored in a properties document next to the final image. So here's a video example of how that works. So I'm starting in capture, and I'm going to capture a menu from Flare, just like I was documenting the Flare software. I'll crop the image to only show a single button. So here's me cropping the image down, just the cross-reference button. And now I'm going to go ahead and save that image. Now I've got this black interface. Well, if the users come along, or the programmers come along later and say, oh, we're going to change the color of the interface. Here's me changing the interface in Flare to the classic view. Now I need to recrop this screenshot. Well, I go into Capture, and I go up to click the Recapture button. Flare remembers the size of my original screen capture and where I'd cropped it to. So by clicking the Recapture button and then clicking OK, I have recaptured that image and recropped it down to the right size, and now it's in my Flare topics in all the right places, cropped down to that size. So that was a big aha moment for me when I realized how powerful that recapturing feature was. Because every time, even in a later iteration of the project, you're just going to need to recapture a bunch of screenshots. The text changes, the color changes, or something, and this recapture button saves you a lot of time. So let's talk about doing the hard work once with resizing images. Let me show you how you can modify an image size in Capture. So here we go, and we take a screen capture. I'm going to take a screen capture of just this, a region of my screen. This is a WordPress document. So I go ahead and capture it, and then I'm going to go down to the properties here on the edit with capture, and then I'm going to go to the file properties, and I'm going to change the background scale. By changing the background scale, I can change the image size, and that will then show up in my Flare project with that smaller image size. Now, if I recapture that image again later, it's going to recapture it and reduce the size automatically because I've already set that once. Now, you notice there that there was the background scale was a decimal point. 1.0 represents 100%. 0.5 is a 50% reduction in size. So that's how that worked. So sometimes you have projects where you're documenting a live system. You've got some data that you need to be blurred out so that people can't see some confidential information. Capture allows you to do that as well. So let's take we're going to do a screenshot again of WordPress, and we're going to blur out some sensitive information about a WordPress installation. So here I take my screenshot of WordPress, and then I come into the image. I'm going to edit this image in Capture again. And in Capture, I'm going to go down and I'm going to select the blur effect mode, and I'm going to drag my box around the part that needs to be blurred. Now this one isn't blurry enough for what I'm trying to accomplish, so I'll right-click on it. I'm going to go down to the properties, and I'm going to enable the blur effect and turn the blur factor up to a factor of 10. And now maybe that's large enough. You'll have to look at yours and see how blurry you want it to be to hide your content. But now notice that in my Flare project, the image has been inserted, and that part has been blurred out. Again, remember that if I recapture this same screen later, the blur size, the blur section will be retained, so I don't have to draw that blur box over it every time. I can come back and recapture that, and it will resize it, and it will blur out the sensitive information automatically. I click Save, and it's in my Flare project in the right size in all of the right places. So what about image classes? Can I do different kinds of things with different images? And the answer is yes. Using your basic HTML that you already are using in Flare, you can create classes of images in the CSS and treat certain images in a different way. For example, this is a screenshot of this is the same image captured, but I'm using image classes to change what the image looks like. So the top one, I'm using an image class of thumbnail, and on the bottom one, I'm using an image class an image with no CSS class. So by changing the properties of the thumbnail class for images, I was able to reduce the size, and this is how you use thumbnails in Capture and Flare, so that if someone hovers over it or clicks on it, there's some action can occur. And we're not showing specifically how to do that in this case, but it's knowing that it's in those image classes should point in the right direction. So how else does Capture save me time? You can store these common settings and profiles. If you're always reducing the images down to 70%, or you're always changing the images to PNG files, or you're always, doing something, some sort of action, some sort of effect on the image, you can save all of those in profiles so that when you capture a new image, you can capture it using that profile. That means, so I might click the capture button in Flare when I'm documenting. I take a screenshot of my software, and the profile automatically knows that I want to reduce it to 70%. I want to make it black and white. I want it to be a PNG file, and I want it to have a ragged edge on the crop. And that will all happen automatically because it's set in the profile. So let's look at how these profiles work. In this case, I want to always have my images be 300 pixels wide with a 1 pixel black border and a drop shadow enabled. So I'm going to go ahead and here I'm going to screen capture an image. I have a profile. So we're just going to capture an image here. It's going to pick a window to capture. Here we go. I captured it. This is going to be too big, so I'm going to change the capture settings and then save them as a profile. So I'm going to right-click on the image. Oh, actually, sorry. I'm going to recapture that same image using this profile that I created. Sorry about that. So let's capture the application, and now it's going to take the same screenshot. It dropped it down to the 300 pixels, added a black border, and enabled the drop shadow. And I'll show you how we actually created that profile later. So how does Capture save me money? We've talked about how it can save me time. Well, of course, time is money. And so when you are not spending extra 20 hours to recapture images, that's money saved. It's time you can spend working on other content. Also, Capture is a free tool with Flare 9. So you're saving money because you don't have to buy a separate screen capture tool. You don't have to be purchasing newer versions of that tool as they come out. Third, if your help files need to be translated, you probably don't use too many image callouts because you don't want to have to redo every image that has a callout. Go in and take a new screenshot, and the worst part's translating those callouts. So in Capture, the callout information, all of that text is stored in an XML file that sits right next to the capture image in the same directory. So since this information, the text of the callout is in XML, it's easy for MadCap Lingo to package that text for translation. So when you use Lingo on your Flare project and you build that project and send it out for translation, your image captions are part of what gets sent out for translation. They come back translated, and every time that Flare generates the project, it goes out and rebuilds those images. And so it's going to generate an image with the translated text in the callout for your new language. Now, of course, that doesn't address the fact that the UI is in English if that's what you're documenting it in. But most people find that the most important thing really is having those captions translate. People can, in many cases, can figure out maybe their UI doesn't have multiple languages, but that hard work is already done for you. Let's see. So then Capture saves you money by making it easy to reuse and single source content. We'll discuss that on the next slide. Here's an image I wanted to show you of when you capture an image. There's the image there on the left. On the right-hand side is a properties file, that PROPS file. That's where all that XML content is stored. You can open that props file in a text editor and go ahead and change all of those settings. You could change the crop size. You could change the text on the callout. You could change anything that's in that you're doing to that image. So let's talk now about. Oh, here it is. Here's the image opened. Notice that I have highlighted here. If you can see it on the screen, it's probably kind of small. but that shape is a rectangle. It has a zero padding bottom, but near the bottom there's the text. This text is stored as XML, so you can translate it or change it easily. That's your example there. So let's now talk about content reuse. So what do I mean when I say content reuse? I'm talking about the ability to use conditions and variables in your callouts. So here is an image of a WordPress installation, and I have put a callout on saying dashboard in WordPress 3.2. Well, it's not always going to be WordPress 3.2. By the time we release an iteration of the project, it may be WordPress 3.4 or maybe 4.0 or whatever. If I've used those numbers and hard-coded them into the callout, then I have to go and open every callout and re-edit it before I release a new version. If I use Flair's existing variable functionality, I just put in the variable for the product version, and then I can update it in the variable settings, and it updates all of my screen captures as well that use those variables. So in this case, I've used a variable for the product name and a variable for the product version. So WordPress is a variable, and 3.2 is a variable. We can optimize your output also based on the media type. So you can capture the image once. And for web output, you can have a group of settings that change the image to a specific size, use a specific file extension. And from the same cropped image, you can create a version of the image that's used in print, one that's maybe a lossless format, or one that maybe your print ones you always want to be in black and white because people are going to be copying them on the copier. Whatever the case is that may be there, you can set those settings independently for print versus online. So people often ask me, what settings do you use when you send your images to print? Because people want to know, I want my images to look crisper. Well, you have to realize when you take a 72 or 92 DPI image and run it through a printer that's 300 DPI, it doesn't look as crisp. And so what you do to make it look crisper is you reduce the image size by increasing the DPI. Because when you raise the print DPI from 92 to 150, but automatically that image is going to be smaller. It's had to compress the image to get it it can't make pixels up out of the air, so it just compresses the image to a smaller size to give you that DPI, which results in having a higher quality, clearer, crisper image. So when I set my images in Flair, on the Image Effects tab, I set the background scale to 0.7 because that's going to reduce my images in general. The Format tab, I use PNGs for online. And then on the Flair Print Format tab, I enable the Flair Print format. I change the format to TIFF, and I change the DPI to 150. Excuse me. Okay. What if I want to create captions for my images? In Flair, I use CSS to create a style for div.caption. And I use these settings: font size 80%, page break inside of void, padding 10, margin 10. You can see the settings here. And that's how I can, and then I go ahead and create I add my text. So here's my, let's use this one here. So this is a man standing on the beach. I'm going to select the whole area. I'm going to create this div, and I've called it div.caption. And that moves it over. It gives it a background color. And then I can do something else if I want to choose figure numbers and stuff. So it's pretty simple, but it's a matter of putting it into a div and selecting it there in Flair. So here I can select it and make a div.caption again, and then I can change the paragraph class of the P element to make it, oh, that didn't do what I expected, sorry, to get it to say like figure 1, or to number the figures, or to call it, image, or give it some sort of styling, change the font size or something related. Another question I get frequently is, how do I create caption numbers for my images? Well, I'm going to modify a paragraph class and say it's caption, call it caption number, and then I'm going to use the MadCap auto number format, and I'm going to use this text here that tells Flare what to do, how to number those images, and then it will allow me to number those images automatically throughout the document. So here is an example of that. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to change the style class of this text to be figure, that paragraph class of figure 1. Now I select the whole thing and I put it in the div for the caption, and there I have an image that's aligned right with a figure number. And if I were to add another figure underneath that, it would show figure 2. Let's see. So how do I create caption numbers for images that include the chapter number? In CSS, it's still a class of paragraphs, but you change the auto number format slightly to give the chapter number, and then it will pull the chapter number from the chapter settings in your table of contents. And you're going to get a copy of all these slides later, so you don't have to write this stuff down, and they're actually all available on my website, and I'll show that to you before we're done so that you can see that this content, all this information is readily available to you, including the videos that we have been watching. So let's go back, and I want to show you a couple more things actually in Capture. So here I have MadCap Flare open. Wait for it to load all the way. And of course, things never go as smoothly as you expect. I don't know what I did to, let's see, let's close it. I'll relaunch Flare. Give me just a second here. Okay. Okay, it's loading. Sorry about that. There we go. I have not installed the Flare 9.1 update yet because I didn't want to cause myself trouble when I was giving this presentation. Maybe I should have. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here we see, here's Flare 9. If I wanted to insert some sort of image into this document, I would go ahead and I can go to Insert, and I have my options here. I can insert an image here, and this would allow me to insert an image that's already in my project. Here I can insert a screen capture. I'm going to go ahead and click Screen Capture. And here's my option. This is my file name. What is it going to call this screen capture? And where should I store it? So it already knows that I'm storing images in this images folder, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. And I have all of these profiles that I can use. Here was that 300 pixel border box shadow. That's what I called the profile. I try to pick names for my profiles that show me what's going to happen when I click that image, because it doesn't do me a lot of good to have random names for profiles if I don't know what it does. For example, this profile, my profile, that's exciting. What does it do? My profile versus my new profile doesn't tell me anything about what's going to happen when I take one of those images. But this one, 300 pixels, border shadow, I have an idea of what's going to happen when I capture that image. So let's go ahead. I'm going to capture a region on the screen, and it gives me an option. Let's see. I'm going to capture a region over here on my other screen. Let's see if we can make it capture. Well, it probably doesn't matter to you guys where it captures from. So we'll go ahead and we'll just capture a screen image here with my slide deck, and it's going to throw it into my Flare project. Close that. Must have two versions open of Flare at the same time. I clicked too many buttons. Okay, so there's the screenshot of the page that I was looking at, and it reduced it in size, and it put a black border around it, and it put on this drop shadow. It looks kind of weird because part of my screen is black because it was my presenter screen, but I could go ahead and right-click on this image, and I'm going to edit this image with Capture, and I'm going to say what I really wanted from this screen was a cropped version of this image. So it's going to open it in Capture. Here's the image. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click the crop button. And now it enlarges the whole image to the original size that I captured it from. And I can draw my crop box to be just this slide. And now notice that it reduced the size. Notice that it has the black pixel around the image, and it threw on that backdrop color automatically, all that from the profile. And when I click save this image, now when I go back to Flare, you'll see that got cropped and it's in there just like you would expect it to do. If you decide later that you don't want it to have the background border or the background drop shadow or something, again, come in here, we edit the image with Capture. It opens up here, and I come here and I can change the file properties. This is where all that magic really happens of changing the settings. In this case, I've got an image effect of a background scale, set background to 300 pixels wide, blur factor 14, shade factor. Keep going down, I can see what the options are. And here's the edge effects. Well, here's like where I can take off the shadow. I'm going to enable the drop shadow, or disable. There we go. I'm waiting, clicking too many times. Now I have to wait for it. But I'm going to disable the drop shadow here by clicking on it. And then click OK. And when my computer catches up with me, there's our image without the drop shadow. So someone says, well, how do I'm going to take a screen capture here. Let's say I'll do it from MadCap Capture. Instead, let's go ahead and take a new screenshot. Let's go File to New Screen Capture. And you know what? Let's take it of this section of the screen. It doesn't matter. This is all just for demonstration purposes. And I captured that. This one actually is a timed capture. I was showing people at Mad World how you can do a timed capture if you wanted a specific menu to be shown, for example. So here is that capture in the capture tool. And I right-click on this, and I can go to change the file properties. Where are you? File? There you go. File properties. And here's where I can control the print format. We talked about the well, let's see. I'm not seeing that one here a second. So let's go down through these one by one. Here's my general. This is the name of my capture. I haven't saved it yet, so it doesn't have a capture name. Image effects is where I can control the scale of the images. This is where I set my background width. I said I want it to be 300 pixels wide, but I don't have a setting on how high it should be. But let's say I say, well, actually 300 is going to, I want to change this to 400 pixels wide, and click OK. And now that image increased in size. Go back down to File Properties. And here's where I can include conditions if I want this image to only be shown in certain versions, or this parts of this image need to use conditions from my project. I can control them here. I can't do it yet because this picture is not linked to a specific project because I didn't capture it from Flare. This is just an open capture that I started in Capture. If instead, let's close this. Save changes, no. So let's go back to Flare. In Flare, if we capture an image, insert screen capture, and we'll just use enhanced for web. We'll capture a region. Let's grab this. Oh, it's on the two screen thing's causing a trouble today. It's not a, I'm using a projector in a conference room as opposed to using the two screens that are normally on my desk. So here we have this picture in Flare. Now if I want to add captions to it, for example, let's look at that option. We're going to edit with capture. I'm going to add a call out. Let's crop it first because that's got too much information. Okay, let's add a call out. We're going to come over here. We're going to draw a text box, for example. Oops, grab a text rectangle, and I'm going to drag it right here. And I've got this little text editor that says I can add text. So I can add, if I were labeling items on a screen, for example, I'd say this is widget A. If I wanted to use a variable for my project, I could click here to insert a variable. And I've got file variables, version variables. Well, here's my product name. Insert product name. And then let's put a space, and we're going to insert a product version. Click OK, and now this says widget A WordPress 1.0. If I push F2, I can edit that variable, or I can edit the text here and change what it says. Okay. Now I can change the settings of these text boxes, of course. I can go to the properties, and I'm not a big fan of boxes around the lines around the text boxes, so I come and I just change this width to 0, and now it won't have a box around it. And there's my text there. I may want to add an arrow. These are some arrows or some things that I created and put them in a palette. But we'll just drag one of these onto the screen, and then I can use that same setting over and over again. Save this image, and notice that when we drop it back into our it goes into our project. And if we scroll over, there's my text, my WordPress 1.0. If I come along later and change the version number, then this will update automatically the next time I build the output. So let's go ahead and apply an image class to this. I showed you how to do the images earlier. Let's right-click on the image, and we're going to change style class. And you can't see it on your screen because that's the way my screens are set up. It's kind of weird today. But if I right-click and go to image class, there we go. I'm going to change it to thumbnail. Now watch what happens. I applied the thumbnail. That didn't do what it was supposed to. Style class. Oh, maybe it's still working. There we go. It put it in there as a thumbnail. Now you see how it just made it small. If we preview this in our browser or preview it in a target, it's going to build it for us. I do not know why my computer is so slow today. There's my image as a thumbnail. Why it shouldn't be that large, but when I click on it, it will make that image get bigger. I must have changed the settings on my in the style sheet showing an example of how that thumbnail looks at the default size. But any image that has the class of thumbnail will have that pop-up effect. Okay. We'll look at those settings in the style sheet just so you can see how does that happen in the style sheet. Well, we go over to our Content Explorer, and we go down to Resources and Style Sheets, and come into our styles.css. We'll open this file. We're going to scroll down to the IMG tag, and notice we have some classes of IMG. Well, here's a bunch of image classes that we've created. And in the case of thumbnail, let's look at this one. This is in the advanced view. I tend to look at things in the advanced view because it's easier for me to see what specifically, what properties are set. Now for thumbnail, I'm in the print media types, which is why I'm not seeing anything. Let's go back to default, and I can see these properties are set locally. For a thumbnail, I've given it a border with the color and a 2-pixel border. This was originally to show that thumbnails you could interact with in some way. So I wanted images that were thumbnails to have a border around them as opposed to images that weren't thumbnails not having a border around them. So then here's my, there's a filter that that opacity 40 is what causes that to be kind of grayed out in the output. You saw that in the preview. And here's my height, my max width, and the MadCap thumbnail pop-up, and the min height, 200 pixels. So I'm saying that the height should be 200 pixels and the min height is 200 pixels. and the opacity, again, 0.4. Depending on which browser those settings will be, one uses filter and one uses opacity. So these settings are how you can set up image thumbnails. But be careful that you don't change a setting here on image that would cause the thumbnails to look strange. In this case, I've set no borders, and I've got a filter of 40. Well, that 0.4 opacity, or the alpha opacity for 40, is what's causing this image to have that kind of strange-looking opacity when we looked at it in the preview. I only really want that opacity to apply to thumbnails. So I come back to my style sheet, and I'm going to take this setting off. Now I'm going to save my style sheet. Let's look now at the thumbnail style class. We see that setting is still there for the thumbnail class. Come back to our topic, and we preview it. And now that image is going to be it's going to be totally clear. We still have an image size issue with this class that we have to work out, but that's how that functions in terms of using image classes with different types of images in your project. Now, the other thing I showed you previously was if we had an image with a caption. Well, let's say this is the caption. We'll actually type in, this is the caption. And I'm going to select the caption and the image, and I'm going to use the group option. It's on the Home tab. And it's this little group button here allows me to group the selected items. And I'm going to use a div that I've created called div.caption. I click that and say OK, and that puts that image and the paragraph beneath it inside a div called caption that is aligning it right. In fact, let's look at that div to see what the settings are there. And if we go to div, style class is div.caption. We can go to style window. Let's edit the style. Div.caption has a background color, a 1-pixel border. It floats right. It has a slightly smaller font size because it's an image caption. And we have some margin and some padding with a max width. We also have this feature here, page break inside a void. That's important because if we print this document, we don't want our image to be at the bottom of page 10 and the caption to be at the top of page 11. It wouldn't look professional. Image captions should stick with the image. So with that setting, page break inside a void, Flare, when it's generating a PDF or a print version output, if it comes to a point where this div it won't fit at the bottom of a page, it moves the whole div down to the top of the next page. And some people wonder why it says page break inside a void. Why can't I just say page break inside never? The answer to that is because if this caption were 100 lines long, oh, that's odd that it didn't wrap the text. F5 refresh. If this caption gets long enough, this div could conceivably be larger than a full-size page, longer than a full-size page. And then what do you do then? You have to break the text. So a void means that if it's possible, move the div down to the next page to avoid breaking it. If you get to that next page and it's still too long for the page, then it'll have to break it somewhere before the page break. So that's how you get your captions to stick up with the text with the image that they are captioning. This background color doesn't have to be there. It's there in this case because it's very obvious to see what I'm doing, and that this content is different and connected to this image as opposed to the text. So that's the example there on how you can use captions. Let me come back. I have another example I wanted to show you. Give me just a second here. Okay, so let's now say that we're going to modify the settings of this image for print output. I'm going to right-click on this image, and I'm going to come down to Edit with MadCap Capture. here's my image. I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to File Properties. I'm going to try and go to File Properties. I'm not sure what's happening today. Usually my computer is fairly snappy. So this is going to allow us to change the settings for print output as opposed to web output. So in my project, in this case, I've got a web help output, and I've got a PDF output of some sort, whether it's a full-size book or whether it's a quick start guide or something. I have the option here in the File Properties window called Flare Print Format. Now, the first thing you have to do is you have to enable the print format. When you generate a PDF document or a Word document or a frame document, when this box is checked, now it's going to give you a different settings for print documents than it gives for your online. In this case, I'm going to say, for my print documents, I want to use a TIFF image extension, and I want to change the print DPI. I'm going to put 150. Notice how the resulting image is smaller than the original image. What that's done is it's compressed the pixels closer together so that what you will get in your printed output is actually a crisper, cleaner looking image. I can also change my print size, and this is it says that it's going to print at 11 inches by 7 inches, which is going to be way too large. So I could change my print size here if I wanted. I can also just save this. Let's go back to Flare. And I can look at this in my print media type with my page layout. Now I've got some funky stuff set up here, but now I can see that this I must not have a page layout defined for this particular project. That's too bad. Because I could show you how you could see this image on the page. You could see if it's too wide or too small for the printed page that you're working on. And in this case, I just don't have, it's not applying because I must not have a page layout set for this topic. But that's how you change them. You just come over here and Capture, and oops, where did Capture go? In Capture, you right-click on your image and you change your file properties. Now, let's say we have an image that we want to. We use these arrows. I want to use an arrow. This arrow just doesn't. It's nice, but it's not very professional. So I can right-click on this arrow. I can go down to the properties of this arrow, and I have a bunch of settings under arrow that allow me to change pretty much everything about this arrow. I can make it go curvy. See if we can show that. Notice how I got kind of a curve on the head and a little bit of a curve on the corners there. Bring that back down to 1. I can change the head rotation. I can change the size of the tip, the tail, the sides, the color. I mean, I have a ton of control over what this arrow looks like. And once I have an arrow that I like, I can add it to a palette. So if I create this one, let's go ahead and edit it and go to Properties. Let's say that I changed the appearance, and we're going to make it. We're going to make it this gradient, bottom to top, and we want a 1-pixel border around it that is gray, or 3-pixel border that's gray. Okay. Now I'm going to reuse this one over and over again, so I can right-click on it, and then I can add it to Palette. And over here under My Palettes, now that image has been added, so I can reuse it over and over again. Once you have an arrow that you like, a bubble that you like, some sort of text box that you like, you can save any of those objects to your palette and reuse them. If you look here, you have a bunch of palettes that are available to you: arrows, bubbles, loops, rectangles. And those are, let's look at loops, for example. We save our palette. Here are some loops that you could use to select content. You can scroll down. There's a bunch of preset options. And of course, you can take any one of these, use it on your image, go ahead and right-click it, go to Properties, and you can change all of the properties about how this loop works, where it starts, where it ends, how thick it is at the various points, how it scales in terms of size, click OK. Now I have this little black loop that I could save as a palette, right-click it. I can add it, so I don't have it selected. I made it small enough that I can't hardly get my mouse on it. There we go, right-click, and I could add this to a palette. That's not there. I'm on a read-only palette. Maybe I have to go back to my palette and right-click on it. Where are you? And add to palette. Yeah. So this add to palette option is only available to you when you are on a readable palette. Notice that there were arrows, bubbles, loops, and rectangles are read-only. You can use those images, but you can't add new ones to those palettes. So you'd have to come over here and create, and use your own palettes and add those settings or those types to your palette. Okay. So in a brief wrap-up, let me come back and look at this session overview. I hope you see that Flare and Capture combined are very powerful. When you use Capture and you use the features in Capture, there's so many things that you can do once so that you don't have to redo them. You may have to retake screen captures, but you won't have to. I could retake the screen capture and all of my callouts, all of my other the items on the screen, the cropping, the sizing, those all remain, and it just replaces that background image as you recapture your project. And that really does allow you to save time, save money. It allows you to reuse content from your project using variables and conditions in a way that no other tool allows you to do. It's worth it to spend some time looking through some of these examples. I will show you, if you go to this URL, bit.ly/madworldimages, it will take you to my blog post about this topic where I am happy to host a conversation answering questions about how this works and how you can use Capture. If you take a picture with your smartphone of the picture there, you can go right to my blog post as well. Now let's open it up. We've got about 10 minutes left for questions that people have. I think David is filtering those questions for us.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Paul. I will start sending you these one by one, and if you wouldn't mind repeating the questions so everybody can hear.
You bet. Does resizing only change the physical dimensions, or does it also reduce the file size as well? Okay, that's a really good question. Here's the deal. When you resize an image, there are two documents, there are two files that you have that we're talking about. And if we look back at, let's see if there was that example where we looked at the source code. There are, what did I do? Okay. Oh, so there's the properties file, and then there's the image file in this folder. And I don't know what happened. They're further back in the image in the project. But let's look at it from Capture then. Actually, we'll show you really quickly. Come back, Capture. Oh, awesome. Okay. So this image is capture2.png. Can we look at it and see where it's saved? Let's just save it then. File to save as. We'll save this to my desktop for now, just so I can find it. This is our example image. Okay, I'm going to go back down to my desktop now. And you'll notice that it saved two files. Well, those are my cute kids. But it saved two files. It saved this example images.tiff, which is the file that I wanted the actual image file that you insert into projects. It also saved this XML file. Cropping it changes the size of this TIFF file, the image file itself. It does not change the size of this properties file. This is the XML file that contains all of the markup for the items that you have on the screen, the callouts, etc. This is the resulting picture that's built, so that you can use this picture in a number of applications, not just Flare. If we preview this image, click Preview, we see that what we have here is, oh, it's going to preview it in Photoshop. Great. That's not what I expected. But it's just that there's that image itself. And if you look at this properties file and we open it, or let's open with her Notepad++. Come back down here. Okay. We right-click and we edit this with Notepad++. Notepad opens up, and we're going to see a bunch of text here that looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. Let's move this up here. This is a binary form, a binary representation of the original image. And so when we crop it, this original image is actually maintained in the properties file. So cropping, as far as the properties file goes, all it does is change some settings down here at the bottom of the file where it tells me how to crop it. And there's crop information down here in the shape information. So this properties file does not change size when you crop, but the resulting file that sits next to it in the directory is smaller when you crop it. I hope that makes sense. So let's take another question.
Okay, great.
Can Flare create a properties file from an image not captured in Flare to allow you to treat it as an original image captured in Flare? That is a good question. What you can do is, and I actually haven't tried this for a while, but my guess is if I were to take an image in Capture, or in Flare, let's go actually open Flare again. And if I go over to my images folder and I drag some image, let's drag Twitter in here. Well, let's look at this folder really quickly in Windows and see make sure that this image doesn't have a properties file associated with it. Okay, so we see here in Windows, I have this Twitter image. It does not have a properties file, so this is the example of an image you're talking about. Like surf would be an example, surf, any of these surf images or the Twitter image. We drag this, we're using it in our project. If we right-click on this and we say Edit with Capture, and then we change some setting about this, if we were to crop it or do some other thing to it and save that, now, when we go back into Flare, we see that our image is now that smaller cropped version. And when we go back into Windows Explorer, I think I closed that by accident. So go back into Windows Explorer and scroll down to Twitter. Now we see that there is a properties file associated with it. So the answer is yes. You just right-click on the image from Capture or from in Flare and go to Edit with Capture, and Capture will generate the properties file. So next question. How are images affected for mobile help output? How are callouts affected for mobile help output? Very good question. As far as Flare and Capture are concerned, images are they're used their web output or their print output. So Capture is only aware of web or print output, but in Flare, what I would do with a mobile image is I would have a section of my style sheet, a media section in my style sheet that deals specifically with mobile output. And then in there you can say images are never wider than 300 pixels or some other setting. But then you're going to have to test it and make sure that your callouts still look the same, because it's going to try and reduce that whole image to the 300 pixels wide that you've allotted it in the style sheet. So, so Capture itself is not generating a separate image for mobile output, but you can use the mobile section of your style sheet to control how images are sized, how they look, etc. in a mobile output. Next question.
Okay, well, let's take one more, and what we'll do is we'll compile the rest of the questions and send a document out along with the recording link the next day or so with all the Q&A.
Perfect. What is the difference between creating a profile versus creating a class for a set of images? Very good question. Okay, so let's look at classes first because we're actually here in Flare. A class is a setting in the CSS file that affects all images that have the same class. And I can do CSS kinds of things with images in a class. So here I have my image, my div caption. Oh, sorry, not div. I actually want to go down to my image style. Here it is, image, and then I've got these different image styles. So here I have max width, min width, no thumbnail, hyperlinked image, all these different image classes. What I can do with these settings is I can change, let's go to relevant properties. Here I've got block, box, border, and thumbnail. These are the CSS settings of what I can control to the, and this is, but it's applied as it's displayed, and it's being applied by the browser. So, so if I say, for example, that I want a 2-pixel border around an image, and I set it in the style class, regardless of how that image is resized, even if the image is only 50 pixels wide, it will have a 3-pixel border around it. If I set it in the profile in Capture, and then I reduce the image size, that border is going to scale down with the rest of the image, if that makes sense. So there are things, so classes are applied by the browser as it's being displayed, and the profile settings actually apply to the image that's generated by Capture. And profiles allow you to do more things like making the image black and white, changing the DPI. All of those settings that we looked at in the properties menu can be set in a profile, where in the HTML and the CSS side, you're somewhat limited in terms of you know, some of those fancier image enhancement features, but you have your standard border, padding, margin, text align, those kinds of properties from the CSS. So really it's a question of whether you're using the CSS and allowing the browser to manipulate the image, or whether you are doing some of those more advanced image type options. You do those in the image profile, and they will look the same regardless if it's not being affected by the browser. So thank you very much. It's 12 o'clock. I appreciate you joining me for this hour. Like I say, visit my website. It's paulpehrson.com, or just go ahead and use that bit.ly URL. You'll get right to the post that has these slides, the description. These videos that we watched are all available actually on YouTube, and we will send out to you. David will send out to you a version of this slide deck that has links to the YouTube videos so that you can follow them. I appreciate you listening today, and I'd be happy to help you with the project or answer questions.